Okay, recording and then Facebook Live. 3, 2, 1. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is good evening in Chicago, but I don't know where you're at in the U.S. or around the world somewhere, but we are thrilled. We got over 100 countries, coaches that follow us on this great show of ours that we love to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge of status quo. And I am your host, Pete Caliendo. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, before we do anything, do me a favor. Once the show's up on YouTube, go check out the 100 shows on YouTube. If you like the shows, hit subscribe, that big red button. You can't miss it. That's all you have to do. Once you subscribe, you'll get updates on new shows. Do us that favor. And if you like the show, share it. And don't forget, the audio then goes on baseballoutsidethebox.com podcast. That podcast has been around for 3 years. So you got a lot of shows to check out there. You can go back a long time. There's some great people. And we are thrilled that you are joining us this evening. And I got a great host. He's been on before. He is somebody who we love having on the show because he's always got something new that he's working on and something new that he's able to teach coaches in the U.S. and around the world. And by the way, yes, Italian-American, sorry, just happens to be another Italian-American coach. There's some really good ones out there. And I want to welcome National High School Coach of the Year. He's also the host on Sirus XM Radio. And he is the co-camp director with another great, these guys are great infield coaches, but they're also great coaches in general. They teach everything, and that's Nate Trosky. They got a camp together. We're going to talk about those camps because they just got done with a couple of them at some major league facilities. So let me welcome my good friend, Italian-American, Trent Mongero. What's up, Trent?
Hey, Pete, how are you? Thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah, as always, you're a favorite on the show, popular. I mean, I don't even have to do an introduction because every time I put it out there, people know who you are. You've done so much for the game, for coaches, players, you know, I mean, just parents, everybody. So let's just start off. Since I mentioned the camps, let's talk about those camps right away. You know, first of all, your school's in, you're coaching, you're teaching, kids are going to school. That's fantastic. Love to see it. I hope more states will start doing that in a safe manner. And two, you're traveling on the weekends to do these camps. I mean, I have a hard time just doing the show.
Well, yeah, it's been quite a challenge, but yes, we are back in school, and that's unbelievable. We've actually just celebrated a month back at our high school in Georgia. All the schools are back in. We're face-to-face learning. Football is in their 4th week of competition. Volleyball, softball, everybody's playing, traveling on buses. Kids are going back and forth to school. We've had relatively no issues. In fact, we've had no serious issues at all. So knock on wood with that one.
And let me ask you, so everybody knows that's Georgia, and some of the also some of the precautions you guys are taking with the students. It'd be neat to know what they're doing.
Oh yeah. So of course, you know, we're all wearing masks, and the students have been fantastic. Following, you know, we have 2,000 students approximately at our high school, and we've had no issues with the students following the rules. We social distance when we can. You know, the students are, as much as we can in the classrooms, they're spread out from each other, so they're not right on top of each other. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much, that's it. So if a student is found to be positive, we've had some, they have to be quarantined for 14 days. And anybody that's been in contact with them also has to quarantine, but I think that is getting ready to go away because we've had so much positive with the way things are going. Unless somebody is symptomatic, I think that they're going to be, you know, they're not going to have to go home also, is what I'm saying.
How about the sports? Is there, like, you have to keep a distance? You got masks? How does that work in some of the sports?
Well, when you're at practice, they need to have masks on. But whenever we're doing something physical, you know, conditioning wise, they can take their masks off, of course, to breathe better. But whenever possible, we try to social distance. We do take their temperature with the gauge. You know, every single day we ask them, of course, the typical questions that you get asked. You know, COVID questions, you know, have you been in a hot spot, those kinds of things. But
and interesting. You know, I'm going to get into the camps too, because I got a question about the camps in a minute. But people know on the show, I've said this 1,000 times. I keep saying it, so I might as well say it again. I'm all for the mask. I'm all for keeping a distance. I'm all for the most important thing: don't touch your face. Remember that one, because that's how they get it a lot of times. But my pet peeve, and I get mad at doctors on television because of this, and not all doctors, but some of them, you know, what about our health? How about good sleep? How about drinking water? How about exercise? How about vitamins? Vitamin D seems to be I've done my homework. I don't know about anybody else. Vitamin D seems to be one of the most critical vitamins to take for this particular virus. And again, don't believe me. Go Google it, then check it out, what doctors are saying. But yet we don't talk about the health part enough. And that's so important. That should be at the top of the list, because eventually, if we did that, we'd all be a lot better off, not just with this virus, but with the flu or anything else.
Exactly. I mean, you got to take care of yourself. I mean, there's always going to be outliers with any illness, whether, it's this or any others, where people that appear to be in really good health, for some reason, it kicks their butt or heaven forbid, takes their life. But the vast majority, I mean, the vast majority of the students, like literally we've had none hospitalized that I know of. Most of them, it's no more than just like a head cold, and they might lose some taste or smell, and then it comes back and they seem to be fine. I'm not trying to downplay, but you're right. Yes, we do need to take care of ourselves for sure.
Yeah, let's jump now, because now you're flying or driving and you got to go to, I believe, KC in Arizona, or Washington, I believe. But talk about kind of how you got to travel, what that's like. Then the rules are different in different states, and then we'll get into the camps too.
Yeah, real quick, with that. So traveling has been interesting. We were very curious how it was all going to go. Of course, every place we host a camp has different rules based on the state. So far, it's been outstanding. Being on the planes has been unique. Delta, of course, has the middle seat open on each aisle, but you got somebody sitting 3 feet in front of you and, 3 feet behind you. Whatever, but American Airlines, when I flew there, it's been packed, and both of my legs on American have been literally full planes, every seat.
Wow.
Everybody wearing their masks. Nobody seemed to be bent out of shape. As far as I know, there hasn't been any issues with that. Never, haven't received any phone calls from Delta or American
Right.
saying, so it's gone fine. And yeah, so each venue, we've been in DC and we've been in KC at both of the major league urban youth academies for those major league organizations, which are within themselves beautiful, amazing complexes. And we've had players come in, Pete, from 10 states in one of the camps and 12 states in the other camp so far.
Wow.
So
Sold out, I believe, right?
yeah, they're flying in. Yes. So they're flying in from all over the place. So, they're also, and most of them are saying that they've been playing baseball all along. Again, I'm not, trying to get political with anything. I'm just telling you the facts. This is
No,
what the
but
people told me.
that's
So,
a concern. And I'm glad you brought that up, because as you've seen, Major League Baseball, major injuries, a lot of injuries early on. Why? Because even though you had that 2 week spring training, there's a difference between spring training and then acceleration in a real game. So you had to be concerned when these kids are coming in, if they've done some activity, because I believe it's a full infield camp.
yeah, it's 2 full days. Yeah, we go 9 to 4 each day, with instruction and all sorts of different, related activities. So, it can be demanding on the kids, but we're very conscious of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and making sure that they're hydrating and, trying to keep their safety number 1 priority for sure.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Urban Youth Academy. Here in Chicago, we have the White Sox ACE program, which is run by the White Sox travel program, but it's a lot for the inner city players, simply because it's just a fact. They can't afford $3,000, some of them, to be able to play on travel teams. That's a big concern. Baseball is getting so expensive. It's not just the inner city kids. There's a lot of other people that can't, afford a travel program. So my question, I guess, is, about the urban programs. I think they're great to have, because other than reducing the cost, some of these kids can't participate in some of these teams, and there's some great coaching. You're playing a lot of games at times. So what do you think about that area?
No, it's fantastic. So when we say inner city, we're not talking about any particular race, right? I mean, we're talking about kids in the inner city, which makes up all the races. Those kids don't have access a lot of times to, like you mentioned, the financial means to play travel ball, which is astronomical, ridiculously high in many cases. These urban youth academies are reaching out to these kids and providing opportunities, introducing them to the game at a very young age. So baseball is a sport that requires very specific training. It's very difficult just to practice on your own, although there's ways to do that. Most don't know how to do that. So these academies, the major league teams have really invested a lot of money and resources into providing great opportunities for the inner city kids. And it's not just the inner city kids. I mean, there's other people that use the academies as well. So
Well, we got kids in the suburbs that can't afford travel teams.
exactly. So it's really not just, we want to be careful because people think like we're pigeonholing these inner city kids, but there's kids everywhere that can't afford it. And so the academy is, they're fantastic, and the camps were absolutely off the charts at these facilities.
And the fact is, baseball in general is a more expensive sport. I mean, it's not the only one. Hockey can get expensive, football equipment, but you're talking about, equipment, bats, cleats, gloves. Here's an interesting thing. Here's what I was thinking. I've had some travel team programs, some very good ones on the show. But I just thought about this. Here's a challenge, and maybe some teams are doing it. If you're doing it, fantastic. I think it's great. But how about a little challenge? How about every travel team giving out some scholarships to some kids that cannot afford? If you got 10 teams, maybe one team, one player per team or something. Just start off, get that ball rolling. That may be something to kind of talk about in the future.
I think that's an outstanding idea. There's always people in every community that want to help. They want to provide opportunities for kids, because when they're involved, no matter what they're involved with in a positive light, that keeps them out of trouble, or at least reduces the odds that they're going to get involved in negative activity, right? So there's always these people. And if you're a travel organization and you reach out, or maybe a percentage of the funds that you charge everybody else goes into this kitty where you can offer scholarships to players. And I think it's even more important. It's important at every age, but especially the younger kids. Like, we got to get the younger kids involved with baseball, before they get taken, not just other sports per se, because it's good they're playing a bunch of sports, but really the negative aspects of community is what I'm talking about. We want to pull them into the positive sporting arena and keep them off the streets, I guess, for lack of a better word.
All right. Trent Mongero's in charge. He's the head guy. And the program is and this program can be used anywhere in the world. The program is to get kids to play baseball from all kinds of kids.
Yep.
And like you said, there's a lot of competition, other sports, other activities. Baseball, no doubt about it, is a slow game and can be a very boring game, especially for kids if they're being controlled all the time. What would Trent Mongero do if you're in charge? What programs would you use to try to attract kids to play the game of baseball?
Wow.
I throw you a curveball, and folks already know on the show that there's no scripts, so we just ad lib, man. We just go for it.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an idea. Hey, here, I'll throw an idea at you. We'll bounce it this way.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of T-ball. I'm just, and I know there's T-ball USA. Why? And I'm not saying using a T. That's different. I'm not a fan of T-ball because of the fact that, hey, I've got high school and college kids that have trouble hitting the ball off a tee. It's not that easy,
Right.
But am I in favor of this kind of bat where it's so light, the barrel's so big? I'm 5 years old. I got a big ball. You play 5-on-5. The ball doesn't travel far. And I think it's a lot more fun, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So, there in general, that's what I would change right away. And no offense to T-ball, because I know they got associations and we've been doing it for a long time. But just because we've been doing it for a long time doesn't mean it's good for the development of kids.
Well, what you're hitting on, to me, is the essence of development. And the essence of development is success, because nobody likes to do things that they're bad at. So, and the problem with the lowest levels of baseball is the human body, is not ready from a maturity and developmental standpoint to execute the skills that the game requires. The fine motor eye-hand coordination that's required to play the game is not, present in most 5 and 6 year olds. Okay. So, so what you just mentioned to me is how we actually should be teaching our, youngest players. And that is, what can we do to increase odds of success? You just put a big bat and a big ball, and you play on a small, and they'll have a blast. They'll love it. They'll have a lot of success, and therefore it's not a bunch of standing around. I mean, to me, that is the greatest obstacle. It's always been one, but it's more than ever, because, you know, most people don't appreciate the inherent, you know, game of baseball that requires thinking and preparation and development and growth and all the different scenarios. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. You know, it's much easier just to go out and shoot hoops or, you know, grab a ball and run down the field and try to keep from getting tackled. You know, it's not always that quite that simple, but I think people got my point. And that is, so yes, I think that that idea that you have is outstanding. We are certainly missing the boat when it comes to development. I can tell you that.
Yeah, especially long term, because I know we want short term results right away. You know, we're a society of, obviously, with technology, we want everything quick.
Right.
You know, and baseball, unfortunately, is a sport. I kind of compare it to playing the piano. You got to do it every day, or at least every other day, you know, to get your body used to it. And advice to coaches out there. I want to start the younger levels, and we'll move up a little bit. But advice to coaches when it comes to, there's a lot of moms and dads that volunteer their time. God bless them. If they didn't, you know, these kids wouldn't have a place to play. And then you got travel ball. But there's a difference between your in-house leagues where you got moms and dads that are volunteering and they maybe play 20 games if they're lucky, you know, the year, than there is to the travel program that still could be parents.
Right.
But when we talk about the younger ones, advice to those parents that are working with those really young kids, maybe some advice to help them out, because it's not easy at times. Remember, it's not what they do for a living, and working with kids is, you know, not everybody can do it.
Yeah, it's really a big responsibility when you take on becoming a coach. It doesn't mean you have to be a great coach. It just means that you have to understand that you're now really a part of whether this team or this group of players are going to advance in the game. So you got to have, you know, you got to have a plan. It ultimately comes down to planning. You have to create simple plans based on the age where you're going to have a productive practice, you know. And we talk about it all the time. Nate and I talk about this regularly, that, you know, if you just show up every day and hope that you're just going to get something done, it's going to be chaos. You know, you have to at least have some basic drills, some basic little things that you can do with your team to keep them all active, you know, and keep them moving, keep them, you know, engaged ultimately, and keep them having fun. Because without that, you can teach them everything in the world, they're still going to give up on the game. If they're just standing there listening to you talk, you know, that's not fun. If they're just standing in the outfield picking daisies while one person is hitting, that's not fun. Okay, the chances of those kids continuing on is not very high. So, you know, of course, to me, everything, Pete, is developmentally appropriate. So what you're going to do with a T-ball practice, you're not going to do with the high school practice, obviously. Okay, that's just giving an example. So there's all these little phases in between, you know, where things start to become a little bit more complex, and there's more time invested in practices, hopefully, you know, and you're working on more of the skills of the game. That, you know, a T-ball game versus a 13-year-old game, you know, they look totally different for obvious reasons. So the kids have to learn the skills, the 5 basic tools, you know, of the game that ultimately the high school players and college players are evaluated on for the draft. Okay, they got to learn, you know, how to hit, you know, show some, you know, hopefully have a little pop in their bat, power. Then you got your throw tool, your run tool, and your field tool. So you're working on those tools, and then you got to actually understand the game itself. First and thirds, bunt defenses, rundowns, cutoff relays, pickoffs, holding base runners, you know, stealing bases. When you go, when you don't go. I mean, there's so much to it. So the older you get, the more you have to start teaching the scenarios of the game. And to me, it all boils down to the issue of this: is we're playing way too many games and we're not practicing nearly enough. And I think a lot of the coaches are intimidated because they feel like they don't know enough to teach. So they just take the easy road, which is basically, you know, let's just take a little batting practice, you know, and maybe hit a few ground balls and call it a day. You know, and that's an easy out for a lot of people, because let's think about it. These coaches, most of them are parents, they have jobs and they have lives, and they're living the drama of their, you know, normal everyday life. And when it gets to be 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, they're probably ready to crash on their couch. Now they got to go to a practice and try to create energy and provide a scenario with a bunch of, you know, little rugrats running around, you know, trying to play. So it can be more stress. And so it is a big challenge. I don't want to intimidate anybody listening that's not coaching, but if you can at least create a little plan, and to me, you can make it easy on yourself, Pete, really. I mean, so if me and you, if I had a, let's just say it's T-ball, even though you hate T-ball.
I
Okay.
don't hate it, but
Hate's a heavy word. You don't
I'm not
hate
a big
T-ball.
fan of it.
Yeah. Hate's a heavy word. I take that back. All right. We can do better. Let's go coach pitch. Okay. We'll move up to that.
There you go.
So if I'm running a coach pitch team and your son was playing on my team and little Johnny over here, or even a mom, and you were like, hey, I would like to try to help. I'm going to, try to get people involved that want to help if they offer to help. And I'm going to say, hey, Pete, like, here's a little drill that I want you to master for hitting. And here's the YouTube video, and you can watch it over and over and over again. Ask me if you have any questions. We'll talk about it. You and I will talk about it. And then I want you to have a defensive drill, this drill right here. I'm going to send you the link. You learn these 2 drills. These are your drills. Okay. So when we have practice and we start rotating around, you're going to be a master of your offensive and defensive drill. And this guy over here and this woman over here. So now I got my station. We got 3 other stations going on, and they can bounce around, and they're actually getting something from those drills. That's just one example of a million examples that we can give to try to make things more productive, where you're actually working on skill sets, and then trying to develop and grow players to become better.
I'm glad you brought that up. And folks, go to coachmongero.com. That's Trent's website. That will have a lot of information. He's got also the YouTube channel. So check that out, because you'll see a lot of drills there. I was thinking about this as you mentioned, the fundamentals. I think that's where we're really lacking in with young kids. We're not stressing those enough. And obviously they got to be stressed in practice. And I always said, if you have a game plan, have a good game plan, because most kids have a game plan too. Their game plan is to screw up your practice, right? So if you don't keep them going and moving, then they got time to mess around, right? But if they're moving around, having a good time, learning things, what would be number 1 on your list? Because kids quit a lot of times because of practice, not necessarily because of games, a lot of because of practice, because they're boring. Some of the things you mentioned, but what would be the number 1 skill and other areas that you think are important that young coaches with young kids work on right away?
Easy. Throwing and catching. Because ultimately, if you can't throw and catch, you can't play. And you're not just there's 2 elements to the game. There's an A and a B. There's an offense, there's hitting, running bases, all offense, and then there's defense. And half the time, every half, inning, you're going to rotate between offense and defense. And ultimately, if you can't play defense, you're ultimately going to weed yourself right out of the game. If you can't throw and catch. So to me, it all boils down to throwing and catching. So like one of the things that I worked on in particular with my young players, and certainly my son, who's now a Division I shortstop, when he was a little boy, was teaching him how to catch. And we did a lot very similar to what you were talking about offensively. We used, and now I'm talking about when he was like 2 years old, everything was about big. So big balls, easy to catch, easy to hold, that kind of stuff. Not little tiny gloves like we give these T-ballers that the ball barely fits in, that, if it was an adult playing and we used a glove that the ball barely fit in, half the adults couldn't catch him, but we're asking 5 and 6 year olds use these gloves, and half of them are plastic and they can't even squeeze them, and the balls can't even get in, and they're dropping them. It's all about success. Everything is about success. Okay. The more fun we have is going to be dictated on, how much success we're having. So you want to try to create scenarios where success rates are going to be higher. It's as simple as, really, it all boils down to that.
The big question always comes up. You're going to build technique. And you're going to work on some drills, and we got a few guys on Facebook with some questions. Building that technique, you're also going to create some fear, because depending on the ball you're using, and fear is a big deal with young kids. How do you're not going to eliminate it completely, but how do you reduce it so that way they can concentrate on working on those skills?
Well, a couple things. One is, all right, let's just go to like 5 and 6 year olds. They're starting. Okay. One is I would have the players. So if I had 4 parents, I would have like the players possibly throwing to the parents where they're not afraid to hurt. Because what happens is when somebody who's naturally pretty good thrower at 5 or 6 years old is playing catch with somebody who can't catch, they don't want to hurt them. They know immediately, like, this person's in danger. So they start doing things wrong just to try to make it easier for that person. But I'll break it down even more than that. So really, this is what, in my books, Winning Baseball, Pete, okay? I wrote those 2 books. They were traditionally published. They're not self-published. I was paid to write them. They come with DVDs. That's at coachmongero.com. We start with T-ball, right? And basically what we try to do, like, this is what I did with Tabor. So most kids are not afraid to catch the ball off to the side of their body. They're afraid of getting hit. So I would have him, this is when he was probably 3 or 4 years old, stand with his glove just like this. And it was like an adult infielder sized glove. Like, so it wasn't super big, but it was already broken in. Like, if I got the ball in there, it was going to stick, right? So, and you don't have to use baseballs. You can use tennis balls. You can use wiffle balls. You can use whatever you want. You can use bigger size balls. But, we got to a point where he could literally catch a baseball off to the side of his body. Now, I was throwing it underhand from a very short distance, and I would make a really big deal about when he'd catch. And I'd pretty much set the ball right in his glove with a nice, easy underhand catch. And then he got to the point where he could do that, like he could catch consistently. And I would let him throw it back to me as hard, because I was very confident. I'm a former player. Some parents might not be, but I would tell him to knock me over. Like, I would treat it like, I wanted him to, it was a big game. I turned it into a big game. And so he would, like, work on his throwing, because he was actually not afraid to throw the ball, and he wasn't even thinking about it. Right. And then once I got him to there, then I got him to where he could move, Pete. I would say, I want you, Tabor, I want you to start right here at this cone, and I want you to run to that cone and look at me, and I'm going to lead you. I'm going to lead you with the ball, and I want you to catch it. So he would take off, and I'd lead him. And then once he'd catch it, he'd try to knock me over. I'd play a big game. And then I got it to where he could step across his body and do it to his backhand. And then I got it where he could do that on the run. By the time he could do both of those on the run, and the run got more challenging, the better he got. Like, I would constantly amp it up.
And the more fun it is.
Confidence grew, fun grew. It was fun. It made everything into a game, And then all of a sudden I missed and got a little bit closer here. We just go whoop up and catch it, whoop and catch it, And then he got to a point where literally by the time he was 6 years old, and listen, my son's no, like, phenom. I'm just telling you that anybody that has decent skills, Pete, can be built up just like this. It's not like he's some, phenom, because he's not. But I just had a logical system of trying to build these skills, and then I could play full adult catch with Tabor by the time he was 6, 7 years old. Like, people would they would be blown away.
Yeah.
Like, I could literally throw, and he always had a glove that was an adult size glove that was easy to squeeze. Now, I might have to tighten the back, right? Might have to make new holes and bring that wrist around, and because otherwise it would fall off his hand. But, so guess what position he played when he first got to, like, machine pitch, coach pitch, first base, because you always put the person at first base
that can catch.
Yeah. So he was over there, and he had, like, literally this youth first baseman's glove that I have pictures of it. It's almost like hanging down to his feet. It looked like, because he was so little. Anyways, what I'm hoping people are going to get out of this is I had a plan, right? I had a plan, and the plan was to keep it simple, progress gradually, take fear out of the equation, okay, and make it as much, just make it as much fun as I could possibly make it. If I already said that, I apologize, but that's, that was it.
And I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think here's the next part, because it's kind of not sure exactly when you do this, on how you do it. And that is, the kid starts throwing. Well, how, even when I was younger, right away I wanted to start teaching. Where's the fine line between letting them just throw and let the body do it naturally, and yet working with them a little bit on some kind of technique where it gets a little bit better, also so they don't get hurt.
Yes. So I'm probably not going to do a whole lot of teaching to young kids. I'm actually going to create drills that will force them to do what I want them to do, within a degree.
Sure.
And if I have to make slight adjustments to an individual player, I might do that. So simple little drills, just teaching them how to get into a power position, just rock back to front. But once they create the power position, you know, just getting their body aligned, really just learning how to create momentum. So the first one is alignment. I teach alignment, you know, to young kids, like just get them aligned where they have the, you know, their bodies are turned in the right way to throw. Because most young kids, like if I'm throwing to you right now, they're going to keep chest open and they're going to throw. They're not going to get turned to the side. So I try to create that alignment and teach them, you know, about lasers on their body. And they try to create everything into like a video game for them, you know, like lasers and, you know, aiming lasers and whatever, you know, just whatever comes to the mind. You got to get down to the level of the kids, you know, that you're working with. Okay. You can't use big people terminology. You'll just fly over their head. But yeah, then once I got them aligned and they can do simple drills aligned, then I'm, you know, I feel like they got that. I'll start implementing direction. So direction is creating a little step before they turn, just teaching the body how to move towards their target to turn and then throw. Because most young kids, again, if they just catch a ball, I know you can't see my feet, but you can see my shoulders. And what they do is they just step forward and throw. So they, you know, when you get your foot turn, your throwing side foot, Pete, your throwing hand foot turned, you take a little step with it and get it turned. As soon as you lift your front foot, it's going to turn your body to the side. So I just naturally create these little movements for them that, you know, and they see their accuracy starts to improve. You know, of course, I'm not going to pair up, you know, I'm not going to pair up a really good thrower with a bad thrower. So if I have two really good throwers that are kids, once they're not throwing to the adults anymore, I want those kids throwing to each other, because it's just like a classroom. We don't want to hold anybody back, right? So if you're a teacher, what you don't want to do is your high achieving students don't achieve, because you're always teaching down to you're holding them back, always teaching down to the lowest learners. So what you try to do is provide opportunities for your best students to keep moving forward as you start bringing the lower ones up to speed, lower, you know, the lower caliber. So the same thing applies to me to baseball. Now that I've been involved in the game my whole life. Okay. So doesn't mean I'm an expert, but I think and do things probably a little more easily when it comes to stuff like that, because I'm a teacher, you know, and two, been a coach for 29 years and I played and I talk the game just like this all the time, you know, but it's really not that hard. It's really not that hard. If you just think it through a little bit, you know, use some resources that you trust to get some ideas, and don't feel like you have to be perfect. That's what I would tell the coaches and the parents. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You know what I mean? A lot of players figure things out on their own too. Like the body will kind of organize itself to work, especially if you have any athleticism whatsoever, and trial and error over time. Oh, that worked pretty good. Let me do it that way again. You know what I mean? And you just kind of start figuring things out, and they tend to figure it out faster without restrictions. So like with Tabor, when I was trying to have him knock me over, when he was throwing the ball back to me, his body's going to organize a lot more naturally that way than if he were just like lazily, like worried about hurting me because I was a little 6-year-old catching and he's like babying the ball to me, you know? So I think anytime you can get someone to swing and throw, you know, in a very normal game-like speed, their body organizes faster that way.
Well, I got to tell you, what I love, you know, nobody loves the coronavirus. Obviously, 200,000 people have died, and
Right.
but what I always try to take positives from some of these things. You know, I'm riding my bike the other day, and I mentioned this on several shows now. Riding my bike, and all of a sudden I see 5, 6 kids playing on their own, whether it's wiffle ball bats or regular bats. Then they're playing football, then they're playing baseball. You know, and you mentioned multi-sport athletes, but you know, like you said, let them figure it out. The other part is, you know, they've got to fail a little bit too, you know, to figure it out. But the next part, which sometimes can get tough for coaches without as much experience because they don't do it for a living, and that is game time. What's your advice, some advice game time to, you know, to make sure that they keep things rolling, that kids aren't, you know, aren't inundated with information and all that? What's some advice there?
Well, one is help. It helps to have help. So don't feel like you have to do it all yourself. So it doesn't have to be a mom, but we called it a dugout mom, you know, and coach pitch, you know, and that mom made sure she knew who, you know, like the next 3 batters that were coming up, you know, Well, it started with this. When they came off the field, they had a certain place, and it was always the same every game where they put their stuff. So they knew where their hat and their glove and their bat and their batting helmet was, because that's chaos within itself, then who the next ones were in line. And like literally she would organize that. And then we would have routines, everything was a routine. How we met before the game was a routine. How we warmed up was a routine. Little simple routines, how we come in, and you have to practice these things in practice. So before you start playing games, like you have to create, all right, this is what we're going to do in the game practice, and you practice all this stuff and they get good at it, and it doesn't take long. So you'd be amazed at what these little kids can master if you actually have a plan and it's consistent, which that's a routine, right? So when you do that, they get really good at it. By game 3, they know what the system is, And I also think, Pete, you got to teach them simple game rules. So practice is not just learning to hit, throw, field, run bases. It's literally like, how do we stop the play? How do we stop the play? Mm-hmm. So you notice that like the younger levels, it's like cat and mouse everywhere. If you don't know how to stop the play, like, they don't know how to do rundowns. Obviously, they can't throw and catch. So the base runner, if they have any athleticism whatsoever, they're just going to score every time they, get on base. But if you know how to stop the play, you can stop the play. So that's just one example. Like they literally got to know the rules and like little simple force outs. When do you tag versus when do you tag a base runner versus when are they forced out kind of stuff, and then teach them that the ball moves faster than they do. So running it around, running the ball around, trying to constantly catch people to tag them out versus being able to throw it, just all the stuff that we all deal with. Always, you go watch any little league game and you'll see the same stuff going on everywhere. Right. So the best teams are the ones that have obviously the little better, going to have better players, but you can take average players and literally prepare them and do a really, really good job. And more importantly, prepare kids to move on to the higher levels, because that's really what you want. You want them moving through and continuing to grow through the game.
Trent, before I get to the high school part, because I want to ask you about high school and how you actually are during games, how you handle games. But before I do that, to the parent and coach, because sometimes, it's not just the coach, but unfortunately it's the parent also in the stands. They mean well. They don't want to see their kids fail. So what they try to do is coach them during a game. Man, that could be detrimental, and they need to understand that. What's your thoughts on that to the parents and coaches?
It's one of the most important things a parent needs to know is that games are not the time for coaching. And all you're doing is creating chaos in your son or daughter when you're screaming and yelling instructions at them. You're probably embarrassing yourself to a degree. And the kid's embarrassed, and you're not helping at all. So the practice is the time where adjustments are made. Games are for play. We play ball. Okay. It's not, you can't instruct people through the game. So, and it happens at the higher levels as well. Parents, they're well-meaning. We all want our kids to be successful. And I think ultimately that's what stems it, is we feel like we can give them instructions. But even on top of that, sometimes the instructions are not correct, or they're counterproductive to what the coach has taught or whatever. So to me, the coach is the coach, Like, so if you want to work with your child outside on their own, then you spend that time with your child and you teach them and coach them up. But when they're with the coach, he's the authority. And, to me, the best thing you can do is just sit back and try to enjoy it and understand failure is going to be a huge part of it. Okay. Whether they're good or they're bad does not define the person that they are. It's just a game. Mm-hmm. Okay. And ultimately, I think it all boils down to, Pete, is emotion. It's just emotion. And emotion and logic, they don't mix. So most parents would be shaking their head yes at everything you and I are saying. And then they get into this scenario and they can't help themselves. They just want to it's emotional. So the emotion trumps the logic. And here we go. So, but if you're that type of parent, what do? Distance yourself from the field. Get out behind the right field fence. Set your chair down, stay and just try to enjoy it, And these are the things that I'm talking about right now. Like tomorrow night, on Mongero Monday, okay, which is, you know, a show very similar to what you're doing. We're going to be talking about, you know, me and we, basically team players versus selfish players, how that is created. Is it born? Is it taught? Is it, you know, is it all these things? And there's so much of what I'm talking about right now ties into that topic, because you just have to let the kids play. And I think we identify with our kids so much that if they're struggling, they think that's somehow a reflection on us. Like if our kid's not a good baseball player, it somehow means, you know, it has some reflection on the parent. No, they're just playing. Okay. The game doesn't define who we are. It's just what we do. It's just a game, you know? And I think the more as a parent, you can focus on the team and talk about the team and compliment the team and cheer for everybody, as, you know, as pie in the sky as that might sound. I think those are the things that ultimately create the best kids, because how many are actually going to actually move on and play this game, even in college? You know, so you got to keep everything in perspective and understand why you're even doing it in the first place. You
And
know?
that leads perfectly to my point of our shows, most of the shows that we've done just recently. And that is, if you do some of these things, kids will last longer in a game. Now, we don't know where they're going to go. They could play high school, college, pro, who knows? But
Right.
if we do it right and we help them do it right, they'll at least play the game a little longer. They won't drop out by 12. I get it. People are going to tell me, and they tell me all the time, oh, they're kids after 12, you know, they got videos and this and that. Let me tell you, if they love baseball, they'll still play it. The problem is if they're not progressing properly, they're not having fun at it, and also getting a little bit better every time, you know, they're just going to stop and find something else to do. So here's the question. This, you know, and hit on anything you like with this, with what I just mentioned, but the ride home, that's a big problem for the kid. Okay.
Huge.
He has a tough time. You know, we joke about it in this way with parents. We say, you know, if there's two parents, you know, you got two cars, send them home with mom, because dad's always going to be a pain in the butt about it. Right. He's always going to question them, everything. So that parent ride home, probably more directed towards the dad, right? Because mom's a little bit more sympathetic, but directed to everybody. You get some moms that are not. So
I've seen some moms that are as
that
bad
are
as, yeah.
so what's your
Uh,
advice now? What does a parent do? Because not only in the stands now, they're watching all this happen, right? I mean, it's failure, and they want to help. Now they got a kid in their car, their own son or daughter, and they've got to, what do they
they
do?
want to break the game down.
Yeah, I mean, and tell
They
them what
want to
they did
break the game
wrong, and you know, and all that stuff. So what's your advice?
Uh, all right. Well, this is a show within
That's a show
itself,
in
but
itself,
yeah.
absolutely.
I'll just give you an example. Like, so Tabor played for me in high school for 4 years. So not only did he have to deal with the coach on the field, but he had to not only ride home with the coach on the
Wow,
bus, but he had to live with the coach.
that's a
Which, you
triple
know,
whammy.
yeah, that's a triple whammy. And he's not the first to have done that. That's, you know, there's numerous players that have gone through that. So my rule, why I brought that up, was our rule was we don't discuss the game at all unless he wants to discuss it.
Mm.
So literally, once the game was over, we don't discuss the game. And I think as a parent, the best thing you can do now, like, I think you have to be careful, because if your son has a good game, so to speak, in your mind, you feel like he has a good game, or your daughter, and, you know, you treat your child differently based on that performance as to when you, in your mind, you feel like they didn't play well. I think that's dangerous. Okay. That's telling them that, you know, your love or your attention is somehow dictated by how they performed. And in no way, shape, or form should a child ever feel that. I think, you know, they need to know mom and dad love them no matter what. And it's just a game, right? And the way you prove it's just a game is you have to behave like it's just a game. And, you know, you might want to tell them all these things that they could have done better, and the team could have done better, and the coach should have done this and should have done that. All it's doing is making the child miserable. You know, you're going to have an exception once in a while, a kid that can handle that type of thing, and they're just going to keep playing and playing, but it's few and far between. You know, go get some ice cream, you know, love on them. You know, I think you need to talk about the entire team and talk about their friends on the team, and, you know, try to find the positives to discuss. And, you know, hopefully the coach is going to address some of the things that happened at practice. And if your son or daughter wants to talk about it, set some parameters for your own child. Like these are our rules, like, they understand, say, look, I don't want to, when we go home, here's our rules. I mean, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about the game. We're going to just talk about life. And, if and it's really that simple. I mean, it's not complicated. But you have to come up with the parameters, especially as a parent, if you know that you are, bent on kind of being that parent who wants to, crawl on them, especially berate them some way, like make them feel like, they stunk that day, or they were embarrassment that day, or heaven forbid any of that kind of stuff ever comes out of somebody's mouth. But, we can be honest with our kids. I think sometimes they're going to want to talk about it some, and you got to be careful. That's not like a free pass to go on an hour-long dissertation about the game. You got to truly, to me, it all boils down to being strategic. Okay. Like everything has a plan. So the players have a plan, the coaches have a plan, parents got to have a plan, and you got to know how you're going to handle things ahead of time. So like I knew what my plan needed to be from experience. I saw a lot of kids ruined by their parents. I saw a lot of kids quit in high school because of their parents. And I didn't want my child to be that. I felt like I knew enough, if I was just strategic and I wasn't perfect, that I could get Tabor to maximize his ceiling at the high school level, whatever that ceiling was. I wanted him to have fun. I wanted his teammates to have fun. Now, of course, practices are grueling, and you got to, that was the place that I typically dealt with the good, the bad, and the ugly, how I felt like I needed to handle it as a coach. But he certainly didn't need to hear it there and then hear it at the house. So
Absolutely.
And you'd be surprised how many times Pete, he did want to actually talk about the game a little bit,
On the flip side, can we be the other way too much? Can we be too praising to how good you are? And necessarily you may not be as good as they're telling you they are, because you've seen some kids out there think now that they're the best, and yet they're just average players. And sometimes, like you said, you need to be told nicely, but you need to be honest with some kids, and they need to work on certain skills.
Yeah. So again, this ties into my talk tomorrow on Mongero Monday, by the way, Facebook Live. If they'll go to my Facebook, Winning Baseball, if you're not on, maybe they'll come visit me.
We'll put it on, we're on a lot earlier. We'll put it on our show notes and put it on Facebook also.
Okay, cool. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern, I believe. Anyways,
Perfect.
so we're going to, as a parent, on the flip side, the worst thing, in my opinion, you can do is give false sense of, tell lies to your kid, build them up, something that they're not. Always, trying to make things so perfect. This is my saying, like, you have to prepare the child for their path. Don't prepare the path for the child. People who prepare the path for their child never want their kids to suffer any adversity, any failure, any hard times, any toughness. They just want this easy path. They're preparing the path. We don't prepare the path. And one way that parents mistakenly prepare the path is they give a false sense to their child that they're better than they really are, or they brag on them all the time in front of them to other people. And this sets a kid up for failure big time, in my opinion. Okay. Now there's nothing wrong once in a while, say something nice about your kid if they had a great game. Typically you want, people that are there, if your son has a great game or your daughter has a great game, they know it, right? They're more apt to tell you, like, hey, little Johnny had a great game today. You don't have to go up to them and say, hey, Johnny had a great game today. They have eyes just like you have eyes, So, but I think, yes, there's definitely that side you want to stay away from, where you try to make so when you're going home and you have these rules, whatever they are, I'm not saying that you have to say all this stuff that's not true. Just be dad, be mom, The kid has other interests besides baseball. Talk about it, don't bring up the game, and unless they bring it up. It's really not that hard to do. I mean, I think it's, so you just find the happy medium. That strategy as well, because we all want to brag on our kids. It's like innate in us. We like want to talk about the good things that they do and tell other people about it. You have to be the adult and realize that's not nobody wants to really hear that stuff. If it's your best friend, Pete, if you and I had grown up together and we literally talk every day, like I have my best friend from college. He was a teammate of mine. We talk every day, literally every day. We're buddies. His son played baseball. My son, plays baseball. We can say things to each other that we would never say out in public about our kids because we have that kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But, I would never in a million years, and I don't lie to him. I mean, I'll tell him immediately if Tabor had a bad game or, whatever, like he struggled. I mean, I'm not going to like paint a false picture. So I'm going down rabbit trails. Basically, I just want to bring it back on center. And that is that, parents have to be strategic. They need to understand that it's just a game, that baseball does not define who your son or daughter is. Softball, baseball, it's just a game. It's just something they play. Okay. To me, the way more important qualities are their character, how they, now I do think you can talk to your son or your daughter, if their effort wasn't there, truly their effort, not their performance, their effort, their
Hustle.
focus, they weren't a good team player. They were disrespecting their coaches. I think those types of things you can address. Hopefully you're not going to have to pound those home every single time, but they need to be addressed if those things are not, because those are controllables, but again, like a T-baller's focus, if you're a parent, and you played college baseball, your T-baller's focus is not going to be like your college baseball experience. They're 6, 7-year-olds, they're 5, 6, 7-year-olds. So they're going to have you got to keep all that in perspective. I just think it really all boils down to perspective and a plan, really.
And I love the part about the path, don't set the path for them, because we all know the path's going to be rocky. And if you're setting them a perfect path, there is no perfect path in life in general, and not necessarily in baseball also.
Right.
All right, let's take everybody to high school now.
Yeah.
All the years you've been in high school, you've been dealing with parents, obviously.
29 years.
Yeah. What's changed? Has anything changed in how you deal with parents, 10 years ago and now? Anything in that area for high school coaches that are dealing with parents also?
Yeah. So, yes, parents have changed. We live in a society, Pete, that is so much more like focused on the individual. So I spend a lot of time educating my parents, setting expectations for my parents. Most of them do a good job following the expectations. I think just like any human being, you call meetings and you basically let them know that this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. And, you don't want to be bossy about it, but just set the parameters for their behavior. Like we're not going to talk about playing time. And if your son, he's in high school, he's got to learn how to communicate on his own behalf. So if he's truly not happy about his playing time, he can set up a meeting with me and we will talk, very matter of fact about, and I'm usually going to ask the questions instead of telling him why he should be playing. I want him to basically tell me why he feels like he should be playing, starting or whatever. And they learn to communicate. That's part of becoming a big boy or a big girl. You got to be able to do that. You got to be able to advocate for yourself. Mom and dad are not coming in on the job when you're graduate college and you're in the workforce to ask your boss why you didn't get a raise. You got to be able to talk. So they understand that if you put it in that light, and you have to hold them to it. You know what I mean? Because they will push you, and there's always going to be 1 or 2 parents that feel like the rules don't apply. So I think the older I've gotten, the more gray hair I've gotten, I think the easier, it's never easy, the easier it's been, because when I was a young coach and I didn't have children, that bomb used to get dropped on me all the time. Like, you don't get it because you don't have kids. All that kind of stuff. So they can't use that one on me anymore. And listen, audience, I don't have it all figured out. You know what I mean? I have a process that I feel like gives me the best odds for success. We're dealing with human beings. We're managing personalities. It's really just comes down to communication. The more you can communicate, the better. Your expectations, I have group me's for my parents. I have a group me for my players. And I'm constantly putting information out to both of them. They're not allowed to email me. I will not allow this, like, hey, I want to talk to you, but please don't tell my son, or, that conversation will not take place. If we're going to talk and it's not about playing time, I'm not keeping it a secret from your kid. There's nothing that needs to be a secret. Okay. If it's that important, your son should know about it also.
Yep.
Because they'll pull that one all the time. Like, hey, I don't want so-and-so to, don't tell Stevie, that, nah. I always have other people with me now. That's something that's really changed over time. Not going to meet with a mom by herself or even a dad. Because then it's what, they can try to twist it on you.
What they said, he said, yeah, it's all kinds of.
And when people are angry about things that are important to them, they can be vindictive. Not all the time, but it only takes one or two, right?
Absolutely.
So you always got to have, sometimes I'll ask them, hey, can we record, this conversation? Will you give me permission? That way we can talk, and, no one can ever say like, hey, I said this and you said that, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like Twitter, Facebook. When you're on Facebook, you say all kinds of stuff. All of a sudden, you're on a tape recorder. Now everybody behaves a little bit nicer.
Yeah.
You said emotion, okay? You said parents are in the stands. It's emotional for them and all that. Well, Trent Mongero's on the field with his high school team. What do you like during a ball game? Because you can get emotional too, I'm assuming, depending on what happens. But what's your advice? Be yourself. What do you like? What should other coaches be doing?
That was a hard lesson for me to learn. If I could speed up the learning curve for any coach here, I would tell you that, your players are going to feed off of your emotion. So if you don't have control, if you fly off the whim at umpires all the time, you're tense, they're going to play tense. Baseball's a game that you have to play relaxed, and you have to have freedom to fail, because, at the plate, you're going to fail. We all know now, 7 out of 10 times, everybody's heard it, that's a high rate of failure. That's 70% failure rate. In the field, you're going to make some mistakes. When you give players permission to fail and you actually live it, like, they know whether you mean it or not, because they can see it in your body language. But, as a parent too, I think you'd be surprised how many kids are exactly like their parents. So if their parents are uptight, the kids are uptight. If the parents are kind of free-spirited, the kids are free. Not always, but a lot of times.
Yeah.
So that was one of the hard lessons. I used to live and die, Pete, as a young coach, with every single play and every call by the umpire. And literally, I made a decision around 2013. Ray Tanner, who was the head coach of the University of South Carolina, when they won back-to-back national Division I championships and played a third year for it in a row. He's a mentor of mine. He actually wrote the foreword for one of my books. And, he told me, a mentor shared with him some of this stuff about learning to just, go with the flow a little more. And it goes into it pretty deep. I'm not going to get deep into it, but I truly applied it in 2013 for the first time. And we played for our first state championship that year.
Wow.
5 years later, we won the school's first state title in baseball. And in between, we lost to the eventual state champion each year in the playoffs. So, and I've had successful teams most years of my coaching career. And I do feel like my players maximize their potential a lot more now as the team, because they have more fun. They're not walking on eggshells all the time. And, that starts with me in the dugout, how I handle myself. Now, there are times that I lose it when I shouldn't, but I try very hard not to, like, if I feel it coming on, I take a deep breath and I remind myself it's a conscious choice, like, let it go, just let it go, because umpires, sometimes they're going to, you just have a personality conflict with one of them or something, and you feel like they're pulling a power play on you or whatever. It's hard to keep it in check. You're tired. You might have a marital issue going on. You might have children issues at home. You might have a bad day at school, as a teacher or whatever. And now you're coming and you're already like, just short-wicked, and it doesn't take much to make you explode. We are human beings. So I think, the more you can be emotionally stable and the same person all the time in the dugout and at practice, I think you're going to get a lot more out of your teams that way.
Yeah, and exactly when you talk about the emotional part, obviously it's a skill, and like any other skill, you got to work at it. So that's not, you can't just tell yourself, because you see a lot of coaches, they think just because you tell somebody something, they're just going to do it. Well, like you said earlier, you got to create a habit. You have to have a program to develop that habit. Now, during the games, this is interesting because there's certain failures during the games. Could be a mental, could be physical, could be, all kinds of stuff. How do you filter through what you're going to talk about? In other words, somebody fails on the field. Now the team comes in. How do you pick what things you might talk to them about when they do fail, or you just let them go completely all the time?
Yeah, I would never address a failure unless it was like a huge mental error. That's something we worked on over and over. Probably would address that. Or if I was somehow disrespected, like by body language or something by one of my players or something like what. But other than that, I'm going to talk one-on-one with a player, and usually I'm going to lift them up, like, hey, it's just part of the game. I believe in you. That's why you're out there. I mean, I believe in you, and you're going to get the next one, and you're going to make that play. And I have no doubt about it. And just give them a pat on the butt, appropriately. And, like we used to be able to do, and just say, let them go about their business, because if they play in fear, that they're going to be punished when they make mistakes, or they're going to be called out when they make mistakes, they're going to play with tension. And when you play with tension and you play with fear and you play anxiety and worry and all this stuff, that does not promote the athleticism in a player. They're when you're tight, you're not going to play loose, of course. And that means you're going to struggle. You're not going to maximize your abilities on the field. You're going to make more mistakes. So you prepare and practice, you put your best players in a position to succeed, and then you believe in them, and you encourage them. Now, again, mental mistakes are addressed differently than physical mistakes, but yeah, I'm not calling a kid out for physical mistakes.
Now, something can happen, and your kids, obviously you've had them a while. I mean, you're a teacher, you run a great program, you understand a lot of this, but there are times where, and I've seen in college, high school, kid hits a fly ball, he's your third hitter, should have hustled out, maybe even the guy even dropped the ball. You never know, right? Dropped it, should have been on second, wasn't there. What's your advice to coaches out there on how to deal with those situations?
Yeah, that's a mental error, in my opinion. That's a mental error, because they have control over that. The hustling is something you have control over. And if you choose, so if it's the first time that they do it, I might just give them a warning, like about it. Same thing with like chucking helmets and stuff. Like, I have to understand, like, I was a player, and I would, I would be a hypocrite to say I never slammed a helmet down. You
Right.
know what I mean? I mean,
Absolutely.
so it's really just, can you keep it in check? Like, if you're coming in the dugout every single time slamming stuff around and cussing, and or not, you're not hustling out a fly ball. Everybody gets disappointed because people want to come through. They want to be the guy, and they're in a scenario to succeed, and they strike out or they pop up to the infield or whatever, and they don't hustle, right? So there's ways to deal with that. You talk to the person if it's not been a habitual situation. Warn them that should never happen and why. Or you can run them in practice if you feel like that will get under their skin enough to make them hustle the next time. Or if they do it another time, you sit them. Or if it's habitual, like I say, if this is a continual thing, you're out. Have a seat. So and so, you're in. Boom. Simple as that.
Yep.
I mean, nothing gets somebody's attention like sitting on the bench. Like, so in high school, it's not travel ball. Nobody's guaranteed playing time. You can't do things the way they're supposed to be done. You don't play within the culture of our program, you're not going to be rewarded for that. It's simple as that. And I always try to be the opposite guy, though. I try to point out, I'm not perfect, Pete. When I see guys doing things the right way, though, I usually will mention those guys in group settings. Like, person on the bench that didn't even get to play tonight, but he was ready to come in. He knew the outs, the scenario. He's watched the pitcher. He stole a key base for us right there, got in scoring position and scored the winning run. That person's just as vital as anybody else that stepped on the field. And I'm going to make sure that I recognize that every scenario like that, even guys that don't even get in the game, but they're in the game, they're pulling for their teammates. We lay down a good sack bunt. They're the first out there genuinely to, cheer for that. I mean, I'm going to talk about those guys in the huddle after the game. I want to promote, instead of having to constantly use the negative all the time, I want to promote the positive. And just, by what I talk about and what I emphasize, I think the players start to see, like, he means it and it's real and there's consequences if we don't do it.
Hey, folks, earlier I said, you're probably wondering, what the hell is he talking about? Earlier I said that, I don't have a script. I just go at it. I'll tell you why, because I've got great guests on, and they always have a key word. The key word always sparks another question. So that's why we do it this way. Key word, travel baseball. And I bring it up because I've had, we've got some really good travel programs here in Illinois. I'm sure there's very good ones all over the country. I'm not as involved with the travel baseball as much as international. But my question is, because it's there and it's been around, it's a big time business, no doubt. But there are guys that do it and gals that do a very good job at it. You get a lot of these players at the younger levels that have been in travel baseball. Love to hear your perspective for everybody, for the coaches to get educated, because I think it helps everybody. We're not here to criticize anybody. What things do you see that these kids, when they come to your program, that they need to work hard more on? And it could be off the field stuff, right? On the field stuff. And what things that maybe you see that some of the coaches are doing a good job with them?
Right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and preface what I'm about to say, that there are some organizations out there that really do it right. I think the challenge that most travel ball, especially high school level, age travel ball, showcase ball, is that the kids are often from many different programs from all over the place, and they have a hard time getting together to practice. So that's obstacle number one. That's a huge obstacle. I do think overall that the quality of players fundamentally has deteriorated significantly in my 29 years.
And so let me stop you right there just real quick, because I think it's important. You said a key one there. Is that relatable to they're playing more games than they are practicing?
100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly why. And it's all about playing and winning, as opposed to practicing and getting better. And you want to play games. Games are important, but you should be practicing twice, if not three times as much as you're playing, especially at young ages. And the benefits will be huge. Nate and I talk about all the time, because he has an academy in the Dominican Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about the culture of the Dominican players and how they're just constantly, throwing and hitting, and, they're just constantly working on their skills. And it's not so much, he said the games are like festivals half the time. They don't even know who's winning and who's losing. And they're just out there having a great time and, dancing around and playing. And it's all about the fun. And we're worried about how many rings our 8-year-old travel team has won. That is totally like upside down, in my opinion. Nobody cares how many rings your 8-year-old team's won. Nobody cares how many rings your 13-year-old travel team has won. To me, winning matters for the first time at the varsity level at high school. Okay. Or those age kids playing in travel tournaments, the huge ones like the Worldwood Bat tournaments in the summer and stuff, where there's 300 plus teams. You win that tournament, you've done something. Okay. Like, I understand a ring coming from, 360 teams and you're the champion. That's for a week-long tournament or 10-day tournament. That's an amazing accomplishment. But most of the so-called tournaments, are watered down. I'm just not overly impressed with a lot of it. I do think the upper level teams that truly get the better players and coach them up and have quality coaches, and if you can find that type of organization, that's outstanding. I think the vast majority are watered down money makers, and I don't mean to slap anybody in the face, but that's my opinion of it. And I think high school coaches get a bad rap. I think there's really good high school baseball coaches. I think there's bad ones. I think there's really good travel ball coaches, and I think there's bad ones, and probably equally proportionate. Just because you played professionally doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach. you
Well
know, all
said.
those things, you know what I mean? And a lot of times people are just sticking their name on these organizations. And, you know, I'm in Georgia, so my perspective might be different than other places in the country. I mean, we are a great baseball state at the high school level. In fact, I've even put it out there on Facebook and Twitter and caught some flack for it, but I truly believe that there's about 3 or 4 high school baseball programs in our state that could beat any travel ball team anywhere in the country at any day. I mean, Parkview High School, Loganville High School, you know, those guys, all of their top players, every single Buford High School, every single one of them are like going to play in college. Most of them D1. They're like, you know, I mean, Buford was in our conference. They had 5 D1 arms on their staff. I mean, guys that are 95 to 97, you know, Clemson commits, you know, like everywhere on the field, all these guys, they got D1 guys that can't even get innings, you know, like, so, you know, but the coaches really work all year. High school baseball in Georgia is really, really good. There's a lot of guys that do a great job, and the travel ball as well. Like you know, I was directly involved with 5-Star National, you know, cause that's where Tabor played coming up. They were, you know, at the time they were called Chain National before they switched the name. So I get both perspectives. I really do. I understand there's good and bad in both, Pete. And, you know, the great thing about high school baseball is it's governed. So there's rules and there's things that you can and can't do. Travel ball is a monster out of control. I mean, it's just, you know, there's nothing to govern anything that's going on. So you just got to do your homework and make sure you get in the right organizations.
Yeah, and you know, one of my concerns I brought up on the show, and that is, you know, you always look at this. Sometimes, you know, you got a 10-year-old travel team or a 12-year-old, and we're just trying to help. You know, and we're talking to medical people. We're trying to get facts and figures, and you got 10, 12-year-old teams, 10-year-old teams. You know, they might play 5 games on a weekend. You know, major league players don't play two. They don't like playing double headers. There's so much, you know, stress on the body. Now we're playing 5 games
Yeah,
with 10-year-olds, and they're not multi-sport athletes. They're not developing their bodies either. I mean, that's a
right.
problem.
It's a big problem. And that's the stuff. So the Dominican, like if you think about the Latino, you know, influence in Major League Baseball, you know, they're not doing that. They're not going and playing in tournaments on the weekend, you know, where they're playing multiple games, 4 or 5 games in a day. I mean, I can't even imagine. So to me at the high school level, a doubleheader is a heavy, big deal. Like because winning matters, and you know we're trying to jockey our way into the state playoffs by winning our conference. And you know, like a doubleheader is stressful because we're going to be there early, we're going to take batting practice, you know, we're going to play, then we got a break, and we're going to play. I mean, that's how state playoff is. It's in Georgia, it's best 2 out of 3 at every round.
Hmm.
So you know, we play 30 regular season games, and you got best of 3 every round all the way to the state championship. A lot of games, a lot of stress for winning, good stress, you know, competing. But I can't even imagine like playing 3, 4, 5 games a day. Like that's ridiculous. And you know, I know you have tournaments and there's certain things that you have to do, but kids are not preparing themselves to do that. And that's where injuries come from. So if a
Well,
kid does nothing all week and then they show up on a weekend and of course they want to compete and do their best and they max out on whatever they're doing, say pitching, you know, that's like telling one of us who hasn't lifted weights in 2 years to go in and I want you to go max out on the bench and squat today and see if you don't get hurt because their bodies are not prepared. Now, had we been squatting and maxing and working out for a year, and you say, I want you to max out tomorrow, you know, on the bench and squat, you'd have no problem and you wouldn't get hurt because your body's prepared. So the kids are not preparing. And in the Dominican, they throw every day and they're not like throwing with the intent to throw every day. They're throwing rocks, they're throwing sticks, they're throwing balls, they're throwing softballs, they're throwing footballs, they're throwing water lob balls. They're throwing, you know, their arms are prepared to throw and they're still not playing 3, 4, 5 games in a weekend. So this is what that boils down to, in my opinion. Adults have to be the adults. Like, you know, you got to be able to step in and say, you know, my kid we got to have a break. Like we can't do this all year, you know, and we got to do some things outside of the travel ball organization to make sure that your arm is ready, you know, to compete. So to me, that's just logic and you got to be the adult. You got to say enough's enough. I've had parents, I'll say this before you ask the next question. And I'm actually curious if we got any questions but from the audience, but what was
we do. Problem is,
Forgot the point I was going to make.
Caliendo is having trouble with Facebook somehow because I had some questions. I can't find them.
Oh,
How good am I? I'm a host. I'm not the director, but I lost my director because of the virus.
no worries. I remember what I was going to say. So, like, I have parents come up to me and say, my kid's going to go play, he's going to go do this, he's going to go do that. And I go, why? Like, it's your off season. Well, because he wants to, well, be the adult, here. Like, the winter, to me, the winter stuff that happens, Pete, where they're trying to get ranked. So kids, they've taken off for however many weeks, months, and then all of a sudden in mid-December, they're going to go out and try to like get ranked, and they're going to go try to like do things that their bodies aren't ready to do. I've had numerous players come back hurt from those events and not be the same. Like, so we start, you're going to be baffled by this, but like this year we start in Georgia. High school baseball starts January 15th. January 15th.
Wow.
Okay,
you guys have the weather.
Huh?
You have the weather.
Well, North Georgia, not so much. South Georgia, yes. Like where I'm at, like we're about 27 miles from Florida. So, I mean, it might be 80, it might be 50, but it's still warm, relatively speaking. North Georgia, it's going to be really cold up there. But yeah, we start January 15th. So my point is you go do these events in mid-December, and 4 weeks later, you're starting high school baseball. And if you come out, come back hurt at all, it might cost you your entire spring. So the adults have to be the adults. Kids are going to want to play, but there's a time when you need to go be a kid. You need to go on family vacation. You need to play other sports. You need to get involved in other positive things so that your body can recoup, your mind can recoup, and you don't have these overuse injuries, because kids will burn out. They will burn out. The vast majority of them will if they just go on and on and on with it.
And we've had this discussion before on the show. What's interesting about it is, we've always said showcases, there's fine. Showcases aren't a problem as long as you know which ones to go to, how many to go to, and all that. But my concern with showcases was this, you're talking about your area in the Midwest, all of a sudden we've got showcases that are in December in Florida. Well, our kids aren't ready for that, but yet they want to go because all the scouts and college coaches are there.
Right.
My advice to the NCAA, and I'm sure they're listening to Pete Caliendo, but also to Major League Baseball is, if you're so concerned about the injuries that are occurring in arms, then why don't you take a break, stop going, just organize with the showcases. We're not coming in December. And I'll tell you why we're not coming, because we're just seeing kids getting hurt from this. Right. And if they don't come, there is no players. Schedule a different time, kind of like a period where you're going to do that, where it's a little safer for most guys. So don't get me wrong, I'm all for showcases. I get the part about, and I know it's a business. Mine is a business too. As long as you provide a good service, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're not providing a good service, I got a problem.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. The problem is there's no governing body. So if so-and-so says we're not going to do it, someone's going to step up and do it because they're going to make some money, Excuse me. So it's really it's a catch-22. There's some really big tournaments in November and December. Showcases, not so much maybe necessarily tournaments, probably tournaments too, but just got to be careful. You get one arm, you get one chance at this, and yeah, you can have surgery and you may, and you got to go through all that, but you have to be smart. It all boils down to intent and plan. You need to be strategic. So if I know that I'm going to go competing, if I live up where you are in Chicago area, and there's something in Florida that I want to be doing in mid-December, I need to break out the calendar and I need to back up at least 4 weeks prior to that and have a plan of what I'm going to do to make sure that I'm ready to go. So when I go down there, I'm not hurt. I don't get hurt, or at least reduce the odds.
So ramp up to be ready to go full speed, basically.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
a great point. And then the other part of this is a concern also. You mentioned it's not governed, right? And then anytime something's not governed, you're going to get some chaos.
Right.
High school baseball's got pitch counts. Now, some tournaments have gone to pitch counts. And I remember 5 years ago when I asked, and I'm not going to mention names, I asked a tournament person, a big one, maybe you should look at doing some pitch counts. And, they all agreed, yeah, it's good to have those pitch counts. The problem is if we don't all do them and I only do them, nobody's coming to my tournament. They're
Right.
going to the other ones. So is that an issue also? I mean, when it comes to, travel baseball with pitch counts?
Yeah, I think, anytime we can look after the kid, sometimes we got to do these things because people can't make decisions. When winning seems to ruin a lot of people, like trying to win, like the attempt to win, right? They're going to all of a sudden maybe abuse the kid, not even a good word. They're going to like ask a kid to pitch that maybe they shouldn't because they got a chance to win, this tournament. And so the emotion of the winning, maybe, you don't truly understand that this injury could happen. And I don't think anybody's intentionally trying to hurt anybody. I mean, I truly think that's not the case. But pitch counts force people to have to make the right decisions, and I just think like they're a necessary part of it now. We have to govern this to help, and if all these travel ball tournaments would get on board and do it, I think it's going to reduce injury to a degree, just because people aren't going to be over pitched,
Yeah, and I know pitching can be a problem, but I'm even talking about
Yeah.
injuries in general. I mean, just
Yeah.
overuse, right?
Yeah.
And again, what I'd love to hear from you is, because I think this is good varsity baseball, your varsity team,
Of
how you
course.
handle your pitchers a little bit, because you don't see not many major league pitchers pitch 3 games in a row, even if it's 2 innings each. They're not coming 3 days in a row, and these are fully developed people. How do you handle your pitchers from your starter to maybe some other guys? How much rest they're going to get?
Well, everything is done on a plan. I mean, we're preseason, getting our pitchers, whether they're pitcher onlys or position players who pitch, because we have multiple two-way guys. And that has to be managed. And how you manage it is you have to gradually build them up. So we start, with a plan, weight room, banding, long toss. Then they start working pens, fastballs only, more just hitting spots, not anything about velo. Then you start adding in velo. Then you start adding in, more pitch counts. Then we start adding the breaking ball in, reducing pitch counts down a little bit when the breaking balls get added, then build up. So our whole goal is we do what I just explained earlier, is we look at when is our first regular season game and how many pitches do we want this player to be prepared to throw on that day. And then we start backing it down on a calendar, and so they work their way up. All right, now that's just non-conference. What about conference? Conference, every area is different. How many non-conference before you play conference? Every state, every area is different. So you have to take a look on the calendar, like, when do you want a pitcher to be able to throw 100 pitches? When is it going to be warm enough, and when do you need them to be able to compete safely at 100 pitches? And then you got to build it up. It's just a plan. It's just a plan. And it doesn't always work out perfect. Like sometimes there'll be a glitch, like a guy will suffer some sort of tendonitis or something, and we got to like ease off of him completely for 2 weeks. And he's going to the trainer every day at the school and coming over. And now we got to kind of like, revamp that plan. But it's always, communication between the player and the coach. We talk about how important that is. They're not that, that's a whole nother topic, but basically you can't be a hero. You going out there and trying to tough through pain, that's just you're going to be done for the rest of the year. You're hurting your teammates. Okay. By that. But at the same time, we want the guys to be prepared for the workload that we're reasonably asking them to do. And then of course afterwards, so we have a pitching coach who coached in college for 26 years at my high school. And, he does an outstanding job, and not everybody's blessed to have that. But I really am able to take that element and, just turn it over to him, and he manages that. That's his job. That's what he does full time in our program. And then he, of course, I know everything that's going on as the head coach, but his job is to let me know like who's ready, who's not ready, you know, who's whatever. And we're constantly just managing. It's all about managing, right? So, and not putting somebody in a situation to get hurt.
All right, Trent, we're getting close to the finish line. And when I mentioned pitch counts, folks, if you're listening, think about it. You got high school pitch counts. In the World Baseball Classic, we have pitch counts with major league players also. But yet some of us don't look at them at the younger levels. And think about it. That's where all the injuries begin. That's how they start. You wear and tear there, and everybody says, well, he got hurt in high school. Well, yeah, he got hurt in high school, but it all started when he was younger. It didn't start in high school. And that's what my concern is with watching young kids pitch too much. Throw as much as you want, but don't pitch too much. The other thing is, Trent, when you talk about showcases, it'd be interesting in your perspective. Advice to kids also, and it's parents, because they'll maybe tell the kids if they're not listening, when they go to a showcase or a tryout, what's some tips to, make sure they're doing things correctly?
Well, I think you got to separate yourself. There's 100 players there, whoever's watching, scouts, evaluators, everybody starts to like kind of blend together after time, and you have to be able to separate yourself. And how you separate yourself is you got to be willing to stand out. So you should be hustling on and off the field. If it's games, you should be hustling to your position, hustling off your position. I think your body language has to be outstanding no matter, how good or bad you do. I think that, they're looking more for your tools anyways. You're, in a scenario like that, they're evaluating more your tools, which are your measurables, how fast you run, how hard you throw, how, the different things that we do now with Rapsodo and bat exit speed and all sorts. They're doing these measurables. And so if you have bad at bats, I think they're looking to see like how you handle adversity. I think it's really important that you hustle. You have great body language, you have great energy, even when nobody else around you is, because so much of the baseball at these showcases and these tournaments, which a lot of times we use those terms synonymously, are not always the same thing. I mean, a tournament, a showcase is more of a place to showcase what you can do. There may be games at a showcase, but it's not necessarily a tournament. Okay. So you might be playing games or just doing like a pro style workout where you're throwing from the outfield, shortstop, taking your BP, whatever, or a combination. So we got to be careful with the terminology, especially for people that really don't know. Okay. But standing out is, to me, the easiest thing to do now as it's ever been, because so many players are afraid to stand out. They don't, I mean, it's like a morgue on the field and there's no energy, and, and it has to be genuine. Like, I'm not saying like you got to scream and yell. I'm not talking about idle chatter like, hey batter, swing batter, like, back in the day. None of that stuff. Just genuine, talking to your pitcher. Hey, me and you, back to you, talking to your, hey, who's got coverage, just communicating, just talking, just hustling, bouncing around and being on time every pitch, like literally being ready for every pitch that's thrown, not being caught daydreaming, like you're truly in tune with the game. And you don't see many guys like that anymore, Pete. Like you would think like everybody could do that.
Right.
And so few can actually do that. And so you can stand out. You can stand out in a showcase environment, and that should be your goal, especially if you're not like, what I would call like passing the eye test. You're short, you don't weigh very much, but you're a player. You play hard, you get dirty, you hustle around, you're in the right place at the right time, you bring energy to the game, you're talking, your pre-pitch is on time every time. I mean, eyes like yours and mine and scouts and college recruiters, that stuff stands out. They can see that very quickly.
Great stuff. Hey, listen, let's finish it off with what you and I were talking about before we got on the air. And that was, with the unfortunate coronavirus, all of a sudden, sports are shut down. High school doesn't have games prior to this. Kids need to be noticed, obviously, by college coaches. Talk about that and how you guys been dealing with this with your players, what coaches can do to kind of help their players at maybe even at this stage now.
Yeah, it's a big challenge right now for the high school seniors in particular. even the juniors, but the seniors right now. So the 2021 class, of course, most across the country didn't even get to play at all last spring. We got in 14 games in Georgia before we were shut down, but most didn't get to play. The college recruiters were given a dead period by the NCAA for most of the summer. Division I is still on a hold from being able to recruit. Then you want to add into the fact that, the NCAA gave the seniors back their eligibility from last year. So not all of them took it, but a lot of them did. And so now you got all these kids returning, for another year that would have graduated.
Wow.
So you got them, and then you have the draft, only 5 rounds this year. So all those players from the 5th round to the 30th round, or however many rounds they would have done, are now going on to college. So you have this influx. I mean, college baseball literally might be the best that it's ever been from top to bottom the next 2 years. There's just so much talent. And I think to a degree, professional baseball wants that. I think they want college baseball to become more like the minor leagues right now. I mean, they're eliminating those teams. You're probably well aware. They're cutting the minor leagues down. More and more players are getting drafted out of college, and they're realizing that they're being developed in college. Anyways, that's a whole nother topic. But now you got these seniors, these 2021s that are, very good players trying to find a home. And, the D1s, they can't even go see them play right now. D2s, D3s, JUCOs, NAIA, they can. So they're still getting those opportunities if there's roster room, you know what I mean? So they're battling just for roster spots.
What happens if, like your seniors, let's take them further, they don't find a college? What's your advice to them?
I would say the JUCO route, 100%. And for those of you that don't know anything about JUCO baseball, especially in the South and in Florida, it's tremendous baseball, like Division I caliber teams in Florida at JUCO. Plus now they have this thing called a gray shirt. So it's a gray shirt. So what's happening is these kids are graduating high school and maybe they don't have a program to go to, right? So what they're doing is they're going into like an academy, like Pro 5 Academy in North Carolina. And they're playing games, and it's not collegiate and it's not high school.
Right.
So your college
keeping their skills up.
Yeah, your college clock doesn't start till you enroll. So if you
Right.
take this year, it's like almost just like a year where you're developing, you're growing, you're maturing, and you're at an academy, you're working on your skills, you're playing high level teams. You got teams coming in from other countries like the Czech Republic and stuff coming over playing these academies, and some colleges can even play them. Like they can play them. So when my son was in JUCO in Florida last year, at College of Central Florida, they were playing a lot of these academies, you know what I mean? And for whatever reason, they do it for recruiting purposes, but the academies are able to play. It's not counting against their eligibility. And now you have this opportunity. So I think that's what I would encourage a lot of these players. If you love the game and you're not getting a chance, don't give up. Maybe try to find an opportunity, if you can afford it, to do a gray shirt somewhere, maybe. Or
All right, mention to our audience, you got camps coming up?
Yeah, so the Elite Infield Camp. So if they go to CoachMongero.com, slide on down to the live camps, click on it. It'll take you right to the registration. We got about 5 more coming up this fall through the winter. Our next one is in Ohio. I think it's October 10th and 11th. And they can look that up. Nate and I will both be flying in, of course, for camp. We expect it to be full. And then it's looking like it's going to be. And then I hate that I'm not looking at the computer, but I'm thinking. We got 3 in November.
Wow.
We have Tennessee and 2 in Georgia, 1 in North Georgia, where I used to coach at North Hall High School. I got 1 at Glenn Academy the weekend where I coach right now, the weekend before Thanksgiving. And then we have 1 in Texas that Nate and I did last year. We're going to go there. So about 5 more, and then a couple in the spring. So yeah, they can check that out. CoachMongero.com. Yep.
Yeah, and we'll have it on the website. We'll have it on actually on social media. We'll put it on also as we put our clips of the show. Now I'll finish it with this. I had mentioned, they will throw you another curveball. I had
Sure.
mentioned it's nothing to do with skill development or anything. You've been watching Major League Baseball. Are you ready? Because the playoffs are coming up pretty soon. Are you ready to pick the two teams going to the World Series and the one that's going to win it? Because I picked it 2 weeks ago, but I'm never right, so
Cardinals.
that's why I do it.
I'm picking the Cardinals.
To win it all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, this is called baseball outside the box, and you are going outside the box. Everybody's going to pick. You know what they're going to pick. They're going to pick the Yankees and Dodgers, right? That's
Yeah. You know why I'm picking the Cardinals? I literally have no idea who's going to be in the World Series, but Adam Wainwright is a friend of mine, and he's also a graduate of Glenn Academy, where I coach.
Oh,
And
nice.
we're not a private school, by the way, even though it sounds like it. We're a public school, but he's our most famous alum, and our field's named after him. It's called the Waino, Adam Wainwright, and he's having one of the best years. I think he's 39 years old. And he's having a tremendous year, and nothing would make me happier than for him to win a World Series again this year. So I'm pulling for the Cardinals.
Makes sense. And a great organization from top to bottom, man. I picked, I have no idea, but I picked the Rays and Padres, and I picked the Padres to win it all just because they added some pretty good players there at the end. But everybody's going to go Dodger Yankees. Trent, man, great evening. Loved it as always. That we could do this for 5 hours. Problem is I gotta have more espresso if we're gonna do that. So
I've been drinking coffee, so I'm good to go.
There you go. Appreciate being on.
What's that?
Thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you, Pete, for having me. Yes, I appreciate it.
All right, that's Trent Mongero. Don't forget website coachmongero.com, Twitter Coach Mongero, and special thanks to obviously Trent for doing the show for us this evening here in Chicago, and also our producer Brian Kroc with the Lineup Media Group. Thank you for everything you do. And a special thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world for joining us. Don't forget, subscribe, Peter Caliendo at YouTube. All the show notes will be on our website, also on Baseball Outside the Box podcast. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next show.
Good evening.